Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, hi again, everybody. This is Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our special guest is Bill Sowell of Sowell Management. Bill, welcome to the Think Small podcast.
Good morning, Rob, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Bill, first of all, let's talk to our guests about what Sowell Management is, serving the independent financial advisor, and and then go into how you came into this business and become the founder and CEO of Sowell Management.
Sure. Well, the easiest thing to say is I never intended to be where I am today. So we'll get that out up front. It evolved over time, and very excited for
It's
the
becoming a
pathway.
common theme here in the Think Small podcast. So go ahead.
Yeah, I would guess so. So Sowell Management we're an independently owned registered investment advisory firm. So we're as of today, we're just a hair underneath $7 billion in assets. Most of that is AUM that are advisors directly licensed underneath us, and then we have other RIAs that are affiliated with us. So at the end of the day, we're a service provider. So if you
Mhm.
think of the life and the world of a financial advisor, we provide every service for that advisor. Our whole purpose is to support fiercely independent advisors in their on their pathway to create a sustainable business. So from marketing to portfolio management, technology, compliance, we have an advisor solutions team that does a lot of the back office stuff. So really everything we've done, we've built the infrastructure to support financial advisors. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, our goal is to put the advisors in a position to focus on building their business by working with their clients, having more time to work with their clients, and to continue to build and grow their business.
Right, right. So for those of us in the audience who may not be familiar with this kind of network of what the independent financial advisor really is and does, they've got the feet on the street client relationships. They're managing retirement accounts and savings accounts for their clients, but they need someone like you to kind of manage those assets and manage those investments, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we're really careful about how we manage that because, we recognize there are clients that have certain accounts that they either want to manage themselves or that the advisor has hands on. But we have a phenomenal investment management platform that is loaded with institutional quality managers. So,
Hmm.
so to take that off the plate of the advisor who's trying to wear too many hats, and being a really good asset manager takes a lot of time and knowledge and wherewithal. So it's kind of hard for somebody to be really good at managing a client base and managing assets. There are
Right.
some that do an okay job, but for the most part, advisors really need to focus on growing their business and leave that to the real professionals. So across the board, it doesn't matter what the asset level is of a client, whether they're just getting started, whether they're mass affluent, whether they're high net worth or even ultra high net worth. There's not any size of wealth that our investment management team doesn't already work with and manage, and they do
Mhm.
a great job. And it's
Yeah.
interesting too, because what clients want today is different from what it used to be. Used to, you could put a mutual fund, a stack of mutual funds together and call it a day. Well, that doesn't work anymore, with ETFs, and then now the private markets that are much more available to clients. It's a whole different world out there. So there's literally not anything on the spectrum of an investment that even an ultra high net worth client would want that we don't cater to and that we don't have.
Interesting. So also in learning about your business a little bit, Bill, you have a relatively unique set of offerings that you can work with your client, who is the independent financial advisor. You can kind of help them manage their business through the entire life cycle of their business, right?
Yes. So, I
So
think
talk a little bit about that.
I think one of the biggest differences between us and what I would call some of our competitors is that a lot of our competitors, they have a box, And if you join the firm, you fit in the box, and you're in the box, whether you like all of it or use all of it or not. And with us, we're very, very consultative in how we work with advisors. Every advisor is different. There's not, you can look at the whole universe and there's not two of them that are alike. They're just like fingerprints. So, we're from a very consultative standpoint, we truly sit down with the advisor and we partner with them. And that's, one of the things that runs true to our company is we partner not only with our advisors, but even our vendors. We don't have vendors, we have partners, and we all look out after each other. So, so from a consultative standpoint, what we want to do is find out, how can we help you? As an advisor, what are your pain points, and where can we really use the infrastructure that we built to come in and support your business? So, what we don't want to do is take away that independent nature from the advisor. They're the one that built their book, and they had a purpose of how they were going to do it. So we just want to plug in and support them and ultimately help them build and grow their business.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Up to and including maybe even taking partial ownership or management of their business should they desire to do so, right? And even full out acquiring their business if they decide to make an exit.
Yeah. So if you think about the life cycle of a Sowell Management advisor, and we just officially launched, even though we've done some acquisitions and some partial acquisitions in the past, it's really much more of a focus for us now. Everything we've done to this point, we've grown organically. So a couple of years ago, from some advisors that were looking to retire, we actually had a couple of pass away. That was really our jump into what I would call the more M&A side of the strategy. We announced last week, there was a press release that went out. There's a company called Merchant, phenomenal guys. We're thrilled to partner with them. They have come in as a financial backer for Sowell Management to work with us primarily on our M&A strategy. I funded the growth of this company personally, but we've hit a point in size and breadth and scale that for us to really get to the next level, we needed a partner. So I spent 2 years looking for the right partner. Actually, it was probably longer than 2 years. But so we were really excited to formalize that relationship with Merchant and bring them to the table. But what that has brought forward is our ability to bring advisors in underneath an equity program. So that will allow them to participate in the equity ownership of Sowell as we continue to grow and build ourselves. And the key behind it is the alignment of the fact that we are true partners. So as a minority owner, and we will do minority positions, or we'll do a full acquisition based on the scenario and the situation. So again, it kind of goes back to, from a consultative standpoint, looking at the advisor and figuring out, what are they trying to accomplish? Where are they in their own personal life cycle within their business? So back to your question, the life cycle of a Sowell advisor, in an ideal world, an advisor comes in, we take a minority ownership in their firm, we help them build and grow over the years. And then at some point when they're ready to slow down or get out, and that's another little nuance that I think helps us differ ourselves from others too, is from a succession planning standpoint, when an advisor gets to a point where they're ready to slow down or exit the business, then we'll facilitate that and put them in our retail division, which is called Trek Wealth. At the end of the day, the benefit is to the client, because the client has been with that advisor through their however many years. And with that advisor being on our platform, we know that client. And even though we're behind the scenes, we see their accounts, we know how the assets are being managed, we know how the advisor is working with the client. We've developed a long-term relationship with that advisor. Even though we're behind the scenes from a client standpoint, we're very familiar with that advisor's business and their practice. And that's another nuance. I hate calling it a practice. I always tell advisors, we're not practicing anymore. It's a business. So we have insight into their business. And when it comes time for that eventual succession plan, we're not telling the advisor how to exit. We want to solve for how are you trying to exit and what do you want to do?
Right.
Is it over a period of years? Is it 5 years? Is it something you're just ready and you want to get out? So all of those variables we take into play, and we can facilitate that. So going back to the original question about independent advisors, it still allows that advisor, they have the independence and the say about how they want to exit. And from my perspective, I want that advisor to help us with that transition. And whether it's a year, 2 years, or 5 years, that that the transition at the end of the day I mean, if we don't have a successful transition, then it's not worth doing any kind of a deal. So really working with that advisor to make sure that we have a successful transition is the key. So I think the way we've developed this whole life cycle, I think is very unique and different from within the industry.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like this is your key differentiator because a lot of the other much larger um, registered investment, accounts out there, they're not offering anything like this, right? They're just manage an independent advisor's book of business and that's it. This is this sounds like this is a key differentiator for you.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure of there's being a registered investment advisor, and going back to the history of Sowell. So I converted my personal practice to fee only in 1995. It actually took me about a 2 year period to get it all transitioned over from the old transactional world to fee only. And
Right.
back in 1995, I was in the top. I don't know exactly, but I would have to assume I was in the top 1% of anybody going fee based. So I've been in it for a long time. I've seen the entire industry starting to transition over, and I don't even think we're at first base yet. There's still so much business on the transactional side, but it is very, very clear the entire industry is moving the direction that we moved to, 30 years ago. So,
Mhm.
but as a firm, it's been really exciting for me to see that transition take place, and and going from originally where there were very limited opportunities to do fee-based business, it was basically within a brokerage account. Now there's not anything that you can't do on the RIA side from a business perspective and working with your client. There's nothing out there anymore that you can't do on the fee-based side. So it's
Right.
been really exciting for me to see this huge wave move over to where we are. And, to me, to what I would call now into relevance. When you look at the private equity money and that has poured into this side of the business, it is phenomenal. And anytime I'm talking to somebody, especially an advisor who's looking at leaving a wirehouse or that more captured space over to more of an independent business model, when they're questioning about, well, I don't know about fee-based, or my question to them is, look around the industry and tell me how many advisors that have gone from fee-based back to transactional. I don't know one, not one. But on the
That's
other
a great
hand,
question.
look at all the advisors that are flowing out of the old traditional wirehouse space and transactional world over to the fee-based world. And it's a mass wave. So that in itself, along with what I said a minute ago, when you look at the private equity money, especially that is just poured into this industry, and the growing size of the large enterprise RIAs, it's the writing's on the wall.
hmm And just so our audience is clear on your definition here, fee-based means you simply are charging a moderate management fee for your services based on the total assets under management for that specific client, as opposed to earning commissions on every time you sell a certain stock. Correct? Is that a layman's definition for you?
Well, you're spot on, and that was why, early on in my career, I when I started back in 1990, and I had sold a business that was a business to business company, and I knew when I sold that company and moved over into this business, I had a pretty good pipeline to get my business started, and I did.
Mhm.
The first 4 years, I built a really nice business. But I realized there was just something that I just felt like there was a conflict of interest when every time I'm buying something for a client, I get paid. When I sell it, I get paid. When I buy something else, I get paid. It just felt dirty to me. So a really good friend of mine he ran the largest, at that time, largest trust department in the state of Arkansas, and everything they did was fee-based. And the more he
Mhm.
and I talked, the more I was just attracted to that business model. And so ultimately I developed a pathway for me to do that on an independent basis. And my initial concern was, well, how are my clients going to react when I go to this, go out to them with this, with this idea? Every one of them loved the idea and the thought. And when you think about it, to be able to sit on the same side of the client and know that everything I do, the only reason I'm doing it is because it's a benefit to my client, not because I'm going to get paid more money. So it just takes that whole
Right.
conflict of interest away.
Right. So, Bill, let's talk about the business itself. I mean, you actually started this business, Sowell Management, way back in 2001. So 25-ish years. You've literally seen it all. And the first time we chatted, you had a really interesting um, experience in the early days. We'll get to that in a second. But in growing this business, I'm sure there was a time where um, things weren't on a hockey stick, trajectory up and to the right, as we say, relative to growth. I'm sure there was periods where revenue contracted and business was a little bit tougher. Can you talk to us a little bit about a period of the business that revenues were contracting? How did you manage the business through that, from an operational side and from a people and employee side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So early on, when I converted my personal practice to fee only, as there were advisors at that broker dealer that saw what I was doing, and I was really good at managing assets, so I started building out basically what's called a TAMP in the industry, which is a turnkey asset management platform.
Mm.
And that is with a focus on managing assets for other advisors. So at that broker dealer, I started building and growing out the business, and that's really how I ended up starting or launching Sowell Management back in 2001. Is I had my own personal practice and I was building this business, and building the business got to a point where I had to make a decision. I either need to focus on one or the other. I couldn't continue to serve two masters. So even though I do still have personal clients, I've maintained that business. Our focus has been 100% entirely on building Sal Management. But
Hmm.
at that broker dealer, they got bought and sold, went through some trials and tribulations of their own, and as the management, upper management changed, things started changing. So at one point in time, and I think at that point we were maybe $300 million in assets, and um, then all of a sudden I could start to see writing on the wall where they were trying to start to insource asset management from within instead of outside managers like myself. And
Hmm.
there were more than a handful of us that were doing it, but there were probably primarily about five of us that were providing those services to the advisors. They started internalizing that, and they started cutting our management fees to a point where, I started thinking this does not look like it's going to end well. So, we started seeing our fees shrink because they were lowering our payout on managing those assets for their advisors, and we had no control over it. So for me, it was a matter of like, okay, well, I am not in control of my own destiny, which is, I don't like that. So that's when, at that
Right.
point in time, that broker dealer was the only firm we were managing assets at. So there were some of the advisors, because some of the changes that were going on, that left there and started going to other broker dealers. So as they moved to other broker dealers, they would tell that broker dealer, look, I'll move over here, but I want to bring my money manager with me or I'm not coming. So before you know it, I was managing assets on about 20 of the largest independent broker dealers in the industry, some of which still exist today, some which have gotten gobbled up by the larger ones. But that was really when things started changing for us. So you're going back to your question where, it's not always been roses. There were a time where you're like, uh-oh, what's going to happen here? For us, that was the game changer, was knowing that we're going to have to pivot and change our business model and not just focus on having that one manager. So, or that one broker dealer. So we literally, over a period of probably 2 years, saw our revenue through that firm shrink about 50%. So
Wow.
it was a major hit. I did still have my personal practice, so that would support anything we were doing. But, here's this growing piece of our business, and all of a sudden, over time, that scales back about 50%. It was definitely an eye opener.
Wow. So how did you get through that?
Well, that's when internally we sat down and made the decision. We've really got to focus on growing these other business lines through companies like LPL, Cambridge, Taurus, Securities America. These were all the large independent broker dealers back in the day. So we really started focusing on working through that business channel to build those businesses. So fortunately, we were able to. So really, what it did, it kind of forced us out of fishing in a little pond to a huge lake. And so at the end of the day, it was a knock on the head. Like, okay, well, looking back, that was the best thing that could have happened to us.
Interesting. So let's flip the coin on that question and talk about a period of rapid growth and rapid expansion. And you and I both know, Bill, that the problems and challenges that come along with a period of rapid growth aren't necessarily known and seen, before they happen, and sometimes you just don't expect them. So let's talk about a period like that.
Well, it's funny you would ask, because there was one particular time that you and I chatted about, and it was, I think I used a different word for when you and I talked about it, but I'll just call it an uh-oh moment.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So the end of 2016, we had a competitor that had run afoul with the SEC, and the SEC didn't shut them down, but the custodians that they worked at, so Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, once they all found out what had happened, they basically kicked them off their custodial platform and told them they had to go somewhere else. So,
and those are big names.
Oh yeah, and we're talking, this firm had at that point in time probably about $2 billion in assets. I knew some of their advisors. So because of what happened, those advisors, they basically had 90 days to move every bit of their assets off of that RIA's platform to somewhere else. So to have 90 days to not only figure out where am I going, but who's going to be a good fit for me, and how are we going to get all this done in a 90-day period? You're talking about a full transition. So getting all for every account a client has, getting all paperwork, the paperwork prepared, but then getting them out to the clients signing them. I mean, it's a massive ordeal. So at the end of the day, because of what happened in the first quarter of 2017, we moved $1 billion of assets onto our platform. So at that point in time, we were just shy of $500 million. So literally overnight, we went from just short of 500 to $1.5
billion, additional billion. Oh my gosh.
And for me, it hit the press. We got a lot of great press, and I think one of the articles came out saying Sal, the shining knight, the white knight, and blah blah blah. And that all was great, but it scared the crap out of me, because I'm thinking we've built this platform to support $500 million in assets, not $1.5 billion. And my biggest fear was that we weren't going to be able to service those advisors in a manner that they would expect, just like I would expect. So that was really a huge turning point for us. we pulled the troops in, everybody buckled down. We started working to make sure our technology was solid and that all the pieces were in place to support those advisors. And it's interesting because we did have our annual advisor conference last week. One of the advisors that was part of that transition, he came up to me and said, he said, there's not one advisor that was in that transition that's left. He said, every one of them are still with you today. And I hadn't thought back on it. But when he said that, I started thinking about it, and it's true. So obviously we did everything right to be able to not only keep those clients, but to continue the story from that point on. Like over the next 12 months after that happened, we onboarded another $1 billion. And then the next year, another $1 billion. And then, so it's like that growth just kept coming. So, we were, I like to use the analogy of a duck. You see a duck floating on the lake and it looks all calm and just swimming along, and underneath it's
But
paddling like
underneath the
hell.
water, they're paddling like hell. That's
Yeah,
right.
well, that was us. It looked great, but we were paddling like hell. And fortunately, I think if I had to, and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but if I
That's
had
okay.
to say anything about what we've done really, really well, we've hired some really good people. So I think the culture we've developed as a firm attracted the right people. And everybody likes playing on a winning team. As a matter of fact, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I asked people, when you were a kid, did you like playing on a losing team? Well, nobody raised their hand. And it's true. Everybody likes playing on a winning team, which in business is when you're growing and doing things the right way. So, so I think really getting the right team together. And I mean, we have a phenomenal team. We've got really good people. And what's a joy for me is to walk through this office. We've got, I don't know, I think 37 employees, but to walk through the office and you see how people treat each other and how they commingle and act around each other. And they genuinely like each other. So I think the culture is the number one thing that has attracted people to us, not only to come work for us, but also the advisors. But going through that growth phase, when all of a sudden a large book of business is coming on and everybody has to jump in and help to get it transitioned, it's having that culture and the right people and the right mindset to just jump in and get things done. So so fortunately, having the right team and then continuing to add the right team members as we moved on has been critical to be able to manage that growth. And it's very intentional.
Yeah. So I did notice a couple people that share your last name on your website and your executive team and on some key positions. Clearly, there's some family in the business.
Well, my wife and I launched the business. She is not active in the business today. She helps wherever necessary. But originally on, it was Cindy and I and one other person. I mean, it was the three of us that started. And then I never talked to either one of my kids. So Abby and Evan both, they never showed a big interest, and I wasn't going to push it on them. I have friends that went into family businesses. Some of them worked out pretty well, and some of them were a disaster. So I was very, very careful and cautious about how that would. I hoped they would come into business, but I certainly wasn't going to try to convince them or force them in. And so Abby, my daughter, she had a journalism degree from the University of Arkansas, and she did some interviews right before she graduated and never really found anything. So for her, I knew she was really good at technology, just like most young people are today. And we had a position in our technology department, brought her in for an interview. And I made it very clear to both of my children, look, you're not working for me. You will have a manager that you'll report to. They'll make the decisions, and that's between you and them. I'm not involved. And Abby came in technology, and after about year and a half, and she did a fantastic job. She came in my office one day and just said, I know I'm good at my job. She said, but I don't really understand how what I do impacts an advisor and their client. I just know how to do my job and I know I'm good at it. So she said,
Interesting.
I want to go on the advisor solutions team, which that the advisor solutions team is what I call the heartbeat of our firm because they're like any advisor need comes through that team and they're problem solvers and they open accounts, they just they do so many things and it's not an easy job. I mean, as we've talked, independent financial advisors most tend to have a very A-type personality. They want things when they want it. They want them done how they want them. So it's not that easy of a job. Well, she jumped in there and has done a fantastic job. She's our most senior person on our advisor solutions team today. She constantly gets accolades from the advisors. I get emails about once a week from an advisor literally saying, I love Abby. Don't ever let her go anywhere or do anything else. And then Evan actually started interning for us his last 2 years in college on our business development team. So out of college, and I encouraged him to look around. You know, this pathway is totally up to you. Anyway, he's jumped on our business development team and has done a phenomenal job. He's developed a great relationship. He now serves as our relationship manager to our advisors, and he does a great job. So it's very exciting and rewarding to me to have built a company that I'm proud of, but to see my family involved in that is it's been huge. And I think it attracts a lot of advisors to us as well. I think
Yeah.
being in the Midwest, we call it we're at the convergence of the Southeast, the Midwest, and the South. I mean, that's kind of where we are. And so I think that in itself attracts people to us. And then I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, "Well, I love the fact that it's a family business." So, but
Yeah.
it's been a joy to have them in here with us as well.
I'm sure it is, Bill.
And I
And
will say
but they made, go
one other
ahead.
thing
Sorry.
I'll say about that is what's made it work for them is neither one of them came in entitled. They knew they would have to show up and do a better job and work hard so that their peers didn't look at them as being entitled. So I kudos to both of them because that's just how they handled it themselves.
And you see that a lot in small and mid-sized businesses, second generation, even third generation leadership. And sometimes there is a sense of entitlement or from the founders or owners perspective. Well, of course I'm going to have my kids in this business. You took a very different approach. You actually didn't, you never really saw your kids in the business, and you made it totally their choice. And I think that's the environment that really makes them grow and succeed.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I've been involved in a couple family businesses in myself, not my family, and sometimes they're challenging, you know.
Yes.
Um, but I got to hand it to you. So Bill, what does the next like 3 to 5 years look like for the company? Clearly, growth is on the horizon, but give us a little bit more specifics. What does that future hold for Sowell Management?
Yeah, so you talked about that hockey stick earlier, and early on, we've always been on a growth path, other than that one little period I talked about, and then
Sure.
and then that first quarter of 2017 when we really turned the hockey stick up, and then it's continued to grow. I think we're going to be on an even faster trajectory than what we've been on with our new capital infusion from our partner and the plans that we've laid out for our continuing our organic growth strategy, but also the M&A side. My expectations is I think within 2 to 3 years, we will have more than doubled in size. So I would expect to see us at least at $15 billion within 3 years.
Wow, that is an incredible growth goal, Bill. What could possibly be holding you back or stopping you from achieving that goal?
Nothing.
That's the best answer to that question I've ever
Yeah.
heard.
I mean, it's all about the execution, and it's about staying true to who we are. You know, we're not, you know, we're there. There's a lot of what I would call stupid money that has come into our industry. I've seen some of the deals that happen out there, and sometimes I know some of these firms, I know the people, and I'm scratching my head like, I don't know how they're doing that. It just, from a financial standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. So we're not going to pay top dollar. I mean, if all they're looking for is just the top dollar, the most money they can get, we're probably not a good answer for them. If they care about their clients and they care about their book of business and their own experience and their own pathway, then there's a conversation to be had. So you know, it's I think just continuing to attract the type advisors that are first and foremost a cultural alignment with us. That's the number one key. And then I can't say enough about all the partnerships we've developed. And when I say partnerships, talking about our vendor partners. And again, I don't like the vendor word. Vendor, you can find vendors all day long, but to go out and find somebody that can provide, whether it's technology or a custodial platform or whatever it is, and that you form a partnership where you're truly aligned in what we're both trying to accomplish. And that means we're going to help them as much as they help us. So I think those are two key metrics that I can't put enough emphasis on running a successful business, is having happy customers, which are advisors, and having great vendor partners. We do every quarter, I assume you're probably familiar with an NPS score.
Absolutely.
Our NPS score pretty much every quarter runs in the low 70s, which, if you understand NPS scores, that's considered world class.
Absolutely, it is. Yes.
And that is a true testament to me that, all right, we're on the right path. If we ever start seeing that slip, then we're doing something wrong. So
that's wonderful. So, Bill, this has been just a fantastic conversation. I'm sure if there's any independent financial advisors that are out there and don't know of you yet, they will after this podcast airs. That's for sure. Bill Sowell, he's the founder and chief strategy officer for Sowell Management based in Little Rock, Arkansas. Bill, thank you so much for your time today on the Think Small podcast.
Rob, thank you very much for the invitation.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?